this is a really fun experience. Jason, I don't think I met you. Looking forward to meeting you after. My name is Darren Hill, here with RevU, which is Rev Road University. And this is a really fun and exciting thing to have you here. We're going to be talking about business strategy today. And hi, Aaron. It's one of the cool things that we do here at Rev Road is to help businesses not just, off the cuff say, oh, we're strategic, but actually get into the meat and potatoes of strategy. And this is a great opportunity to review that. One of the things that you'll find as we do that today is you'll find that this is kind of a lick of the lollipop. We're going to do a high-level overview. This morning we're going to talk about business strategy, especially in context of lean startups. And I apologize for being late. We have two of our partners who run PhoneSoap, who we were meeting with this morning, and they're a great example of a lean startup. Lean startups are all about making sure that you have the smallest cost structure possible, that you accomplish the highest amount possible with the lowest investment. And you can do incredible things with that. We were just reviewing the year end for December 17th, for December 2017, and tremendous growth with that company. Really excited about what's taking place there. And they're just one example of the many companies that are part of Rev Road that are doing that. We'll talk more about this wall over here as we go through the day. We have some special speakers we're looking forward to introducing you to. One of them is Pete Skalla, and I will introduce him in just a moment. He's going to take our first session, and that will go until 10:30, and we'll take a break, and then we'll have Provo's new mayor, Mayor Kafusi, come in and speak. She's fantastic. How many of you have met her before? Oh, hey, this is good. So many of you, it'll be a great opportunity to get to know her. She's an incredible leader, and we're really fortunate to have her leadership in this city. Provo, and especially all of this Silicon Slopes area, is one of the nation's best at producing companies, and great companies who care about their employees, who deliver great growth, and who add a lot of value to the community. She is one of the people who is responsible for helping shepherd the infrastructure for making that possible. So this will give you a chance to meet with her and see some of her vision. Following that, we're fortunate to hear from one of Utah's serial entrepreneurs. His name is Brad Creer, and he's an incredible person, a great leader, and a really good friend. He's a philanthropist as well, and we're so impressed with him. I've had the privilege of being able to know him for over a year now, and we're thrilled that he's going to share his story about I lost count of the number of companies, but I know it's more than 4 that he started. I think it's 5 or 6 actually, and been very successful with. And I love the way that he treats his employees and the way he treats his customers. I think you'll be impressed with how he builds that into his business model. So with that, let me give you an introduction to Bart Skalla. Oh wait, sorry, yeah, Pete Skalla. Yeah, which one? We have 2 Skallas, and they're both amazing. And before I do, I needed to make one more comment. One of the things that we do, I was told to make an announcement of this. In March, we have a scholarship, not a scholarship, a competition, a business competition for entrepreneurs. Any entrepreneur is able to apply. They just go to our website and do it. And we wanted to make sure you're aware of that. There's some great prize money available to them. And look forward to having any of you that want to make that a part of your New Year resolution to win, join in that. So come on up here. Do we have you mic'd? Okay, good. Great. So this is Pete Skalla. And Pete Skalla is an incredible member of our team. He's the vice president over scaling and strategy. Pete has a great history. Pete has been a CFO at a number of different companies and an executive in multiple positions as well. Most recently, Pete took a company named Purple. Who's heard of Purple? All right. Yeah.
Great mattress.
It's a great mattress. Come on in. Have a seat. Pete was the CFO at Purple during the time when they went from under 15 million to over 200 million. Prior to that, he worked at a company called Jamberry. Who knows what Jamberry is? Yeah? The nails?
All the ladies in the room.
Right. Okay, and took them from a very low number to also over $200 million as their CFO. and help them go through the process of expanding their operations, all that critical growth, and in both of those cases in a very short period of time. Pete helps all of the RevRoad companies here, the partners of RevRoad, to grow. And he helps them with strategy, he helps them with scaling, he helps them with capital, and it's a real pleasure to have him on our team. So I'm thrilled to be able to introduce him to you. Come on in, have a seat, make yourself comfortable. Shoham, good to see you. We're going to spend the next hour and 15 minutes with you. So go ahead, Pete.
All right.
Take it away.
Darren, thanks so much.
You bet.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Just really absolutely delighted to be here with you. Entrepreneurship is just one of those things that I'm so passionate about. The way that entrepreneurship changes the world, makes things a better world to live in for all of us day in and day out, and kind of subtle. It starts out very small and simple, and the stories of entrepreneurship and how companies get going are just absolutely amazing to me, endlessly fascinating, and having the opportunity at RevRoad to work in two different stages of startup strategy and execution, and then later scaling. And it turns out, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, those are two very different things. You get them mixed up a little bit, and the ramifications of that can be a little bit disastrous. And so that's part of what we want to talk about today is, RevRoad talks about this concept a lot. Why do startups fail? Why is it? Because you know what? It's a little bit of a tragedy, and it's maybe a necessary tragedy because you have to have some failure, right? Not everything's going to work, and in fact, there's even a mantra in startups a lot of times you hear, fail fast. If you're going to fail, make it happen quickly. Don't take years to do it and use up all your resources. But make that happen fairly quickly, but sometimes they fail ultimately and they didn't need to. And so that's what Lean Startup is all about, and a lot of what we're going to talk about. Now let's look at the number one culprit when we look at this. Why do startups fail? And get that one up here. And you know what? This is why startups fail. This is the number one reason why they fail, because we do it wrong. And it's a tragedy when we do things wrong when we didn't need to do it wrong. Now, you all are a lot smarter than I am, but when I was doing a fintech startup some number of years ago, I looked at this and I thought, well, yeah, of course, that's the way you do it, and that's exactly what I've been doing, and that's what's going to happen. And hey, it makes absolutely perfect sense. You start out with a concept and you write a big 100-page business plan. You go through product development, alpha and beta tests, launch that first startup, and all of us should, by the time we're done today, I want you to learn to look at this and just say, no, don't do it, don't do it. It's the worst thing you can possibly do. What kind of line is this as we go from left to right? Straight line, it's linear. And do we live in a nice, clean, simple world where linear thinking works in business and entrepreneurship? I don't know, Course Nova. Is it linear? Start out with this and move to that? Yeah, anyone who's been there, the world's not that simple. We got to work with the way the world really works and make this happen. Let's look at a video that should set the perfect metaphor in our minds for this trap right here.
Let's hide in the attic.
No, in the basement. Why can't we just get in the running car?
Are you crazy? Let's hide behind the chainsaws.
Smart. Yeah, okay.
If you're in a horror movie, you make poor decisions. That's what you do.
I'm being quiet. Breathing on me.
If you want to save 15% or more on car insurance, you switch to Geico. It's what you do.
That's necessary!
Okay, thank you. So I kind of love that one. I saw that a while ago, and this morning I was driving in and thought of that commercial. And it's kind of the perfect analogy. You go up to that door and the chainsaws, and no, don't open it, don't do it. But it just happens again and again, and scares the heck out of us. And that's a lot of fun. So it's all good as far as movies go, but in the real world it doesn't work. The startup world in the last decade and a half, it's learned a tremendous amount about how to do startups really effectively that mirrors the real world. Probably a lot of you are familiar, maybe even some veterans here. What's the quote? Some of you probably even know who said it, but the quote about battles and plans. Anyone know that? What did he say?
a good plan violently executed today is better than a great plan in 2 weeks.
Okay, so you get it going. I've heard that one before. That's not the one I had in mind, but that's the exactly the similar same point. We have a veteran in the back. Your plan only lasts till the first bullet is fired. I've also heard it as no battle plan to ever survive first contact with the enemy is another way of putting it. It's a similar concept here. We talked about this a little bit yesterday for those of you who were here. This man here is an individual by the name of John Boyd. Later in life, in his kind of second career, he was responsible for some fairly significant weapons programs like the F-16 and the A-10 Warthog because he used a really unconventional weapons development. How could he do that? Well, he happened to be the best fighter pilot in the history of the world, very arguably. He ran the U.S., basically the Air Force's equivalent of Top Gun. They called him 42nd Boyd because his teaching MO was to let a student get directly on his tail, the very best position they could possibly be in, and without fail, in all of his years of running this fighter school, within 40 seconds, he aced them, and they were down, and could do it every single time. He was so good. How did he do that? He developed a methodology can you think of any environment that is less linear than aerial jet fighter combat, right? And he developed a methodology for thinking about rapid decision making. Grab some water here. Rapid decision making in high stakes environments and how to do this really effectively and really well. He called it the OTA loop. And if you picture yourself, you're up in the air, you're in aerial combat, and what do we do? Well, the worst thing you can do is think about it for very long and take very much time, exactly like this gentleman indicated a minute ago. And so first thing, observe. Where am I at? Orient yourself in your decision making of what's going to happen. Act really quickly. Observe, orient, decide what's going to happen, and then act, carry it out. And the thing that he emphasized with his students was the advantage. The fighter aircraft you're in is an important advantage, and he actually influenced that in some very substantial ways. But this OTA loop, this decision-making loop of making things happen, the more times you can do that, the more advantage you have. And so those who are able to observe, orient, decide, and act very, very rapidly end up with, even with sometimes for a while the US had inferior fighter planes it was fighting, still kept its edge in aerial combat in some of the war situations that we were in because he taught his students, and really measurably we were going down in the kill ratios, and impacted that by being able to go around that loop really quickly. I mean, let's talk about that for just a minute. Why is it important? Why isn't once enough? Why is it important in aerial combat, and we're going to apply this to startups, to go around this loop multiple times quickly? I mean, any kind of thoughts percolating? I think that nails it. We're not in a static environment, are we? Is entrepreneurship and business a static environment? No, anything but a static environment. And so as you act, you change the landscape, and it's all a little bit differently now. I'm a little bit better prepared after the first time around this loop to execute it again, aren't I? I know what to do the next time, and then the next time after that, and the time after that, and then the enemy does something completely unexpected, and wow, that was different. Well, around we go again, but because of the prior iterations. Boyd talked about something of getting inside your opponent's decision loop, and then you've got them because they're reacting, you're acting, and you're in charge, and start controlling the skies. Let's see. So, John Boyd and the OTA loop. How does that really apply to startup entrepreneurship? And we talk about startup entrepreneurship. I think this applies across a very broad dynamic range of settings and companies. But anyway, I had to throw my all-time favorite startup quote into the mix here. If you're not embarrassed by your first launch, you've launched too late. Anyone have any experience with doing this? Why? That's kind of counterintuitive and paradoxical, isn't it? Anyone have any thoughts on this? Well, we're going to come back to it, and we can, but I'm just curious if that kind of resonates. Forrest.
When he said that, he was talking about how if you try to work out every kink and every problem that there might be, you're probably going to miss the mark and miss your time. If you just launch it and then work it out and see how people react to you, then you're going to have a better chance of hitting the mark and hitting the pain points you're trying to solve.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard that put, inspiration hits when you're on the move most often is another way of putting it. It doesn't happen inside the building, sitting and thinking about it. Get out and get going.
And Guy Kawasaki, he said something similar to this. He has a principle called ship and fix, and ship and fix. And product creation is an iterative process.
Yeah, a little bit similar to the OTA loop, isn't it? And it all kind of goes back to some of the same principles. So we're going to talk about this. Jason, what's our next slide? So strategy, what's the environment that we operate around? Now the OTA loop might be a little bit too simple. In aerial combat, you know exactly who the enemy is. You may not be able to see them all the time. Hopefully they're on your radar somewhere, or you can see them visually. But in some ways it's an even more complex and challenging environment. Maybe not quite as Mach speed, fast paced as aerial combat, but more players, more threats, more moving parts that are going on. At RevRoad, we've adopted the lean canvas. A really remarkable engineer named Ash Mayara, I'm probably not pronouncing his last name right, but he came up with some of these ideas and has executed them very successfully, kind of building on the shoulders of giants, something we always do in entrepreneurship, right? And he came up with a canvas, as he calls it, and I love that term, for navigating the really intense, really high stakes skies of a different kind of combat. But it's a combat where the great majority of people win, or at least can win if it's executed well. It's not a zero sum, somebody wins, somebody loses, like warfare is, and just an amazing process. Now again, historically, you would start out your business by writing a 100-page business plan, and frankly take a lot of time. And well, Bart, what's your quote on those? Soviet? The only ones who...
Oh yeah, the only ones that want business plans anymore are VCs and Soviets. They'll want 5-year plans.
5-year plans. Venture capitalists and Soviets, and the Soviets are going the way of the dinosaurs. And frankly, venture capitalists don't want these anymore either. In terms of the 100 pager, because they've learned this lesson that you need to be very nimble, and so the world is changing, and becoming a much better place for it. Let's just talk about this for a minute, and then we're going to do a live fire exercise to continue the military analogy here, and we're going to create something ourselves. We start out in the problem scope up here in the top left, and you'll notice it's kind of non-linear, exactly like startups are. We're jumping around somewhere, and we'll talk a little bit more about that perhaps later. But we start out with a problem. Why do we start out with a problem when we're thinking about launching a business? Steve, any thoughts for us there?
Why do you start out with a problem? Usually you have to fix something that people want, solve a problem in their lives for people.
Yeah, you have to fix something, you have to solve something for someone. The entire reason for a business to exist is to solve problems for someone. And ideally, we want that problem to be really massive and really big. I mean, we want people to be in deep, deep pain over this, right? If you're solving a problem that it's a little bit annoying around the edges, but not that big a deal, well, that's not exactly a compelling business. We want a deep, painful problem, or at least an unmet need. And sometimes it's that way, right? No one felt that my inability to communicate via computer with my friends in a networked way was a big problem, but then Mark Zuckerberg kind of showed the world that, hey, there's a big unmet need that we can fulfill. So a deep, painful problem or an unmet need. And then we jump over to customer segments Who are we solving problems for? Well, hopefully not just ourselves. Sometimes kind of the scratch your own itch methodology of entrepreneurship can be pretty powerful, but hopefully it's not just for ourselves. Hopefully there's a really big market out there that wants that. And understanding who those customers are and what's going on becomes very important. And then I jump ahead right here to number 9. It's actually near the end, but say, what are the paths for reaching those customers? Those are really the 3 pillars, if you think of it as a three-legged stool here, solving a deep, painful problem for real customers and having a repeatable way of reaching those customers that costs less to reach those customers in terms of your customer acquisition costs than what we're able to monetize in terms of selling that solution. And the rest becomes some fairly powerful scaffolding to fill in the cracks. So let me think they're quite the right way to proceed here. Let's just move directly into some live fire exercise. And we just want to take us through this and get our heads pretty deeply into this, because you know what? It's simple, but it's subtly, even deceptively simple. And so some of you here have even been through this with me, and it starts out really simple, then you realize how what a fun, intense challenge it really is to do this. So let's dive in and start this a little bit. Darren, anything you wanted to hit first before we do that?
I think you've done a great job of outlining where you start here.
Okay.
I will say one thing that I think you touched on yesterday that's important to state, and that is this is not a one-time exercise. It's as Sean said, you've got to make sure that as the dynamics change in your environment, that you're always updating this.
And let's make sure we come back to that at the end once we get our heads into this a little bit. But let's hit that, because yeah, if it's a one-time exercise, it may not be much more useful than the 100-page business plan that was a one-time exercise and it's too heavy. The nice part about this is you can update it and iterate on it very, very rapidly, and that's part of the fun, honestly, but part of the power as well.
Likening this to John Boyd's OODA loop, with this, could you call this your first observation? And then you start in on that loop, but as the loop implies, it's a continuous cycle, and you're going to have many more observations, and those lead to decisions and actions.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the right way to look at it. And so you start out, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, but everything you start out with is just a hypothesis. What's the number one indicator of startup success? In my view, and a lot of people's view, the number one attribute, number one indicator is extreme humility. It's knowing that everything we put on this, every aspect of our business model is just an assumption. And assumptions need to be tested in the battlefield of the real world. And so you start out, hey, I have an assumption. I think this is the way the real world works. Essentially, it's a scientific method, and let's come back. Let's apply that. Let's go find data outside of our building in the real world. Test that assumption. Did it hold up? If it did, fantastic. Chalk one up. Let's move on to the next one. If it didn't hold up, let's figure out why, change that, and go right around again. So let's start a business. You ready? Yeah. Here we go. Someone mind just helping me and putting some things up on the board here? Got it, Tyler? Is your handwriting legible?
Pretty good.
All right, we're good. So let's think of a few problems. And these can be real problems, maybe even one that your business faces and is considering solving out there in the world. But let's think of a quick handful of real problems that the world needs a business solution for, and just talk about them for a minute. And then we're going to vote and pick one. They can even be fanciful. I don't know, my problem is I can't commute to Mars for work or something like that. We could have fun with it like that, or we could make it a real one. Anyway, what's a problem that needs a solution in the world? What about healthcare? Healthcare stinks. Get more specific.
Expensive, hard to find providers. It's difficult to deal with the billing side.
Okay, billing is what about billing as a problem in healthcare?
It's difficult for doctors to get compensated quickly. It's difficult to have greater transparency for the patient to know exactly what they're going to end up needing to spend. It's hard to know what's going to be covered.
Pick one of those three.
It's hard to know what's going to be covered.
Okay. So problem, hard to know what will be covered by, hard for doctors to know what will be covered by insurance. Okay? Okay, there's a problem. Let's get another one. Another problem? Steve? Getting older. Okay. We're aging. That's a problem.
A lot of people want to solve it.
Yeah? Are you speaking from experience, Steve? Okay. Aging. There's a big problem to solve. Someone else, I saw another hand.
People have a hard time budgeting their money.
Budgeting is a problem. Love that. Okay. Bart,
It takes me 6 hours to commute from Colorado to Provo.
you don't have your private helicopter yet.
That's a solution.
Okay. Commuting time takes too long. What else? Any other problems that would be fun to solve? We're going to define a whole business around this. So let's come up with some good ones. AJ?
Instant weight loss.
Okay. So instant's the solution. Let's call weight loss the problem. Is that fair? Okay.
Our air quality.
Air quality is a problem. Okay. Seth?
Difficult to determine people's character or intent in any scenario.
Okay. Judging, gauging character, we'll call it. What else?
Printers. I mean, does anyone have a good experience with a printer?
So computer printers are difficult. Narrow that down. What's the problem with them?
I mean, it breaks. They can't troubleshoot it. The ink costs a ton. Everything about it is just awful.
Okay, printing with computers and the maintenance is a pain in the butt. We'll put it technically like that. At least one more. Anyone else? Yeah.
I'll give you one. I ran into yesterday. This is a little fanciful, but we lose a lot of productivity with our staff waiting on hold on phone calls. So we joked yesterday that we should create some way of eliminating all that wasted time by hiring college students to stay on hold for you. Your staff is actually productive.
Hold times on the phone, the bane of all existence. The internet's helping with that some, but hold times. Okay, let's see. Diane, can I pick on you for a sec? Will you help us to narrow this down to one? Just kind of by audience participation? Yeah, find out what problem this group wants to create a business to solve. Do you mind?
I guess, no, not at all. I guess what we need to do, ladies and gentlemen, is take a vote. So go ahead and look at this. And number one, hard to know what will be covered in your health care. Raise your hand if you would like to solve that problem.
Can we only vote once?
It's up to you.
No, you can vote more than once. All right? So okay, you've got 1 here, 2, 3, somebody on the count, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It looks like we got 11 people.
11. Should we have a limit? They can vote, say, 3 times?
You can vote twice.
Twice, okay.
You can vote twice. All right. This one is dear to my heart. How about getting older? How many of you think that's a problem? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Really? 6? All right, 7. 7 for getting older. Budgeting. People need help sticking to or creating a budget. How many think that? 1, 2, 3. Darren, is that a 4? 4, 5. We got 5 for budgeting. Commuting time. Who thinks that is a problem we should solve? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ooh, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It looks like. 12. Sorry. All right, weight loss. How many find weight loss problematic?
Come on, you guys.
Oh, well, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. Air quality. Oh, especially here. Air quality. Oh, look at that. 1, Okay, well, okay, let's just cross that one off. Printers suck. How about that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And phone call, being on hold on the phones. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. So let's cross out all but the top 3 and have one more round of voting. Can we, Dan?
Sure. So we've got air quality,
Just cross them out. Leave them up, but cross them out.
air quality, commuting time, and hard to know what will be covered. Yep. Commuting time. Yeah.
Okay. So, Jason, will you switch over to the Google spreadsheet? We can share a blank copy of this with you if you want at any time. Okay, and make that full screen and kind of blow it up. We don't need the bottom part right at first, so maybe get it big enough that we can read it. Can you guys read that somewhat? Keep telling Jason to increase it if we have a problem, if you would. That would be awesome. Okay, so problem. We have a problem that it takes too long to get to work. You guys decide on the fly. Do we want to be a little bit fanciful and fun, or do we want this to be a dead serious, has to be completely realistic? We can go either way with that. But top 3 problems we're solving for our target customers. How can we express that? What's the problem with commuting time? So traffic's a problem. Lost time to do something else. Let's think in first person. That's a first person one. My pain point is my opportunity cost. I can't be with my family, or whatever else. Congestion is kind of an external that we need to solve for. So think in first person. We're in our customers' heads here. Say again.
Wasting time.
We're wasting. Okay, wasting time. Jason will capture these as a few of these as we go along. Seth? Stressful?
It's not only a long time, but it's time not.
Okay. So the stress of it.
We've kind of wasted time a couple of ways. I think the real root of that is that we've got so many things to do. I'm so much more busy than my parents and them and their grandparents. But I feel like it's a waste of time because you can't keep up with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we perceive commuting as a time that we should have been doing something else.
Okay.
Maybe I'm proposing this. Maybe the problem really is that we have busy lives and we're juggling everything and we can't keep up.
Okay. So I'm too busy, and it's painful sitting in this slow traffic to make it happen. Mark?
Traditionally, where people live and when they work are not close together. You have people living in suburbia and the businesses in downtown, whatever. But there's a distance between the two as opposed to some newer concepts where they have apartments above and more space below. But right now,
Okay.
it's just pure distance from where people can live.
Okay.
Where they have to live.
Work is too far from where I want to live. Where I want to work is too far from where I want to live, is another way of putting that. Darren?
I was just going to say, there's an expense associated with commuting. I mean, you have to buy a car, pay for insurance, pay for new tires, do safety and emissions.
So hard transportation costs.
Yeah.
Yeah, in addition to the opportunity cost of our time that's already been mentioned. Okay, so that's some pretty good ones. Jason, let's take traffic off since that's an external one, and that will be potentially part of a solution. So we have wasting time, can't keep up with other tasks, distance from where we live and where we work, and then your hard transportation costs. Those are some problems. Would that, if there was a solution for that, would that be interesting to us? I'd like it. Okay. Passes the smell test, Jason. AJ? Okay, yeah. Those signs on I-15 always get my attention of how many people have died so far this month. There's a very tangible human cost to all of this. Chris? Ooh, bad air quality. We're right back to that one. And that is a significant issue as well, a little bit external to this one. But yeah, Mark?
There's there are very few alternative ways of getting to work that might increase productivity for others.
Okay. Let's look at that one again as soon as we get to solution. Jason, let's come over here to the second box on this, our target customers. Who are our target customers? And if you scroll down a little bit, let's even think of it in terms of this. List the characteristics of your ideal customers. Let's zero in. We're going to think of some solution for commuting and this difficulty of getting from where we want to live to where we want to work. Who are our ideal customers? What are their characteristics? What's kind of an archetype of them? Okay, busy people.
Workers. People with full-time jobs.
Okay, employed.
Yeah.
I like that.
Or entrepreneurs.
What's that?
Just about everybody that has to commute.
Okay, so yeah, you have commuters.
Yeah, I'd say like the 9 to 5, because if you're working night shift, you're not going to have a commuting problem. Well, we will, but
Okay.
the time that takes 9 to 5 is a big thing.
So traditional schedules, they have a lot worse time of it. Tyler? Students, okay. Is there anything that would argue against students? If you think ahead a little bit, scroll down, Jason.
Yes.
Right here. Okay, we're thinking about rich students, though. Maybe that's one. Had another hand over here somewhere. Steve.
I'd say distance, like long distance travelers.
Okay, yeah. People already have a long distance. Awesome. Steve, you've done some great work on archetypes. What else demographically should we think of these people? Age, does age matter? What do you think is our ideal age range here that we're targeting?
I would venture to say high and low 30s up to about 55.
Okay, 35 to 55? Yeah. That makes sense. How come?
Probably have the income you're going to need for the price of whatever this is going to cost.
Okay.
I find I get busier as time goes. Family expands, commitments expand.
You're in a stage of life where you have a higher opportunity cost to your time, and therefore your willingness to pay increases. Do we think gender matters here? Men versus women? I kind of don't think so either. Curious if anyone had a thought. Income? Okay, depends on the solution. Maybe we don't know quite enough yet about where we're going. Any other aspects of our ideal customers we can think of?
Yeah, I question your age. One of the reasons the media focuses on the 18 to 35 market, and they put on television, they could have a lot of people watch at age 55 watching a TV show, but they'll cancel it.
Uh-huh.
Because there's not enough age
I've seen that.
35. It's because people who are 18 to 35 are still making decisions on what they're going to do. And so they're susceptible to change.
Yeah, initiating lifetime habits that will represent recurring revenue.
When you start getting over 40, they've already decided what they're going to do. And advertising to them is kind of a waste of time.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point. The people who have the highest opportunity cost, that argues that direction, opportunity cost of their time. There are other factors. And potentially, hey, we need to create an on-ramp here with lower pricing or some other means. Maybe students get a discount so that they can establish those habits. Let's keep that in mind and circle back. Number 3, unique value proposition. This one's going to be a little bit challenging because we don't know what our solution is. So let's jump over to solution and start to brainstorm on what we are thinking for that. Usually when an entrepreneur comes up with an idea, they have a solution in mind, and in fact, often it's solution driven. We're saving that for a little while. that makes it a little bit harder in this live fire exercise, doesn't it? Because we don't know what we're really talking about yet. Natively, naturally, you're going to have some ideas of that in mind. But let's think creatively for just a minute. This might be an interesting one. What is our solution for these deep problems that are costing time, money, lives of commuting? Back here in the back?
Work from home.
Okay. So we're working from home. We'll have to think about how we monetize that one as we go along up here in the front.
I'll give you a vague solution. So you have wasted time. Make it so it's productive. Find some way to be productive with that time while commuting.
Okay.
More vague. So.
Yeah, change the equation to productivity. Think of an example or two for us in the next minute, and I want to circle back around to that one.
I don't know the correct place to say this, but I mean, there's public transportation, right? But public transportation is always increasing going to commute, right? So if you have some form of public transportation that keeps my commute time the same, but allows me to do other things while I'm there.
Okay.
Somewhere between a bus and a black car.
So public transportation, but there's an interesting point there. I can do other things while I'm doing this. When I'm on a train somewhere, even if it takes me longer, that opportunity cost of my time isn't the same.
Cuts down on the hard transportation costs. Solves a couple of
And
problems.
most importantly for Chris up here, it solves air quality.
Self-driving cars.
Okay. Self-driving cars, great solution.
This is way on the fanciful side of the spectrum.
Okay.
A teleportation device.
Teleportation, I like it. I like it. Let's invent teleportation. Back here.
Obviously, autonomous cars. I took a trip to Seattle this summer, and I wish I really had an autonomous car because I could just go to sleep and wake up.
Okay. If only we had a good artificial intelligence solution in the audience. Seth. Funny you should mention it.
How about a new means of transportation altogether, like traveling by catapult or cannon?
Catapult or cannon. I worry about unintended consequences of that method, but okay.
That's development's problem.
That's a development's problem. Bruce, how do you feel about that? Bart.
Elon Musk has a plan to dig new tunnels deep under LA and put your car on a skate, and it becomes a self-driving car under the tunnels.
Sounds a little expensive, but okay. Mark.
One of the things that is a question, in dealing, I read it says top 3 features. We're talking about solutions, not features. So when my first thought when I said top 3 features, the issue of any of these is convenience.
Okay.
So when the solution has to be incredibly convenient for the largest number of people.
Okay.
Buses tend not to do that because they don't stop right where you want to be.
It's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, so is this, when we're talking about solutions, are we actually looking at the features, or is that part of the analysis of the solutions?
You know, the features really become what defines the specifics of our overall solution. And the features ground it to, hey, what is it about this that people are going to find a valuable solution? Right now, we're so broad-ranged in this freeform exercise that we need to identify directionally what kind of a solution do we have, and then drill down even more. But whatever solution that is, if it doesn't have the feature of convenience through whatever mechanism that may be, it's not going to be very useful, is it?
So the features become your evaluation tool.
I think so. That's well put, yeah. Weldon.
Well, I think it depends on who's feeling the pain or where they're feeling the pain. So for the person who says it's less time away from my family, that's a different kind of pain than the one who says this is wasting my time, I can't do other things while I'm driving.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have to focus on which problem, which pain you're trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us right back up here to the top of this. And that's in fact a great point at which you can say, if we had a little bit larger screens or we weren't quite such a large audience, but literally on a single page, you can look at all the key elements here. And so, okay, if if my target segment is students, I'm going to think about exactly that question and proposition you just made differently versus corporate executive employees, aren't I? And at some point, I need to choose because there's not very many businesses where I can really zero in and serve both employees and corporate businesses. Although I look at Course Nova here and think, well, okay, they might be doing that. Anyway, it's a little bit of a unique case. And so keeping the different key elements, we're talking about a business model. Why do we call it a model? Well, because it's not very useful to have the whole landscape. And it's the same reason we carry a map is what I'm trying to say. It's not very useful to have the whole landscape be our map, a one-to-one scale. You can't do anything with it. This one simplifies that down to maybe a 1,000-to-1 scale. I can carry it with me. I can look at it. Does it have everything? No, of course not. The real world continues to be a messy, difficult, dynamic, changing place, which is exactly what makes entrepreneurship so fun. But I can also use it and get the key elements to it. And the next time around, I'm going to drill down even more to some of those things that really matter so much. So anyway, the segments matter a lot, and we'll zero in on that as we continue to go around the horn here. Bruce.
Since you're talking, kind of explaining this, I have a question. I don't know if it's not distracting.
Please.
I noticed that the box unique value proposition has number 3 and solution number 4. And that seems out of order to me, or I'm misunderstanding that. How can, until you know what the solution is, how can we know what the value proposition is?
Psychology. Honestly, it's about psychology. Where's an engineer? What do you guys think of first when you think about a business? Coding, right? The product and what's there. And so a Stanford guy who was really kind of the godfather of lean startup, Steve Blank is his name, and he developed a concept called customer development. And you guys think not so much in terms of customer development, but in terms of code development, product development, software development, creating the product. Now think about those, customer development versus product development. We could take a poll, we won't, but which one is more important, product development or customer development? Well, that's kind of asking, I don't know, is my right foot or my left foot more important in some sense, but which one should you start with? Hold that thought for a little while. Maybe we'll circle back around to that. But which one is it more useful to start with when we're taking a blank canvas like this and coming up with a business? A whole bunch of deep coding or a whole bunch of going out and and talking with your customers, exploring your channels, and trying to help define and make those work, and making a lot of progress in developing your customer and your understanding of that customer. Yeah, Darren.
Just to build on what Weldon said, if I'm trying to solve for my wasted time, and I'm sorry, what was your name, John? No, Jason.
Jason.
You know, I might take Jason's approach and say, well, it's wasted time. I'm gonna invent Audible, and so I can listen to an audio book that I would.
I thought of that one too.
Right. And then it doesn't feel like it's wasted time. But if it's really, I just want to shorten my time to the shortest amount possible, then I think, why wouldn't I invent and I still have to physically go between A and B. Well, the shortest point between 2 points is a straight line, and none of our commutes are a straight line. So how can I get a straight line? No, I'll get a drone that's autonomous to pick me up and fly me there. You know, and actually next week at CES they're launching an autonomous drone to carry people.
Man.
So it depends on the pain point.
Yeah. It really does depend on the pain point. It depends on a lot of factors, doesn't it? And ultimately this becomes a simultaneous equation. If you think of it in mathematical terms, it kind of has to be solved simultaneously, except we live in a real world where we have to proceed sequentially. Here we just imitate solving it simultaneous by going around that loop enough times. So continuing our focus on solution, do we like those? What's a Hyperloop? Okay, Elon Musk. Anything else anyone wants to get up here, Steve?
So just
Okay. So VR/AR conferencing, is that a fair summary?
Yeah.
Okay. Because conferencing really stinks, doesn't it? I mean, we wouldn't have to be here if it didn't stink quite so bad, but it really does. So the ability to do that would be interesting. Okay, let's pick one of these a little bit quickly. Who wants to nominate one of these to be our main one?
I'd like to add one more.
Please.
It's kind of the concept of fancifulness, bend time. Rather than thinking we have to go in a straight line between point A and point B, bring A and B closer together.
You're in relativity and stuff like that now. Okay, so bend the space-time continuum. Who wants to nominate one of these for our go-forward solution that we're going to revolve around for the few minutes we have left?
I'd like to nominate make time during commute productive.
Okay. Make time commute productive. Put a star before that one. We want three nominations. Another nomination, Bart. You. I'm not going to go there. Sorry. Another nomination from the audience, please. From not an economist this time.
Self-driving cars.
Self-driving cars. Okay. Asterisk that one.
I like the VR hologram conferencing one.
I like that. That's interesting too, isn't it? Okay. We have those three. Let's see. I'm trying to think how not to bias this, because whichever one you pick first has a little bit of a bias. Okay, everyone fix in their mind what your vote is. Everyone got it? Okay. Diane, you be our arbitrator here. Quick, just what do you think? We'll take time to count later if we need to. Let's see if one is overwhelming. Self-driving cars? Okay. VR hologram conferencing? Okay. Make time during commute productive? That one has it. Okay. And Jason, if you can move that to the top and just, I don't know if this will do strike through selectively rather than in everything, but ideally put that one at the top in bold and strike through all the rest. So that is our go-forward solution. What does that tell us about the problem that we're solving? Let's go back to that top left quadrant now. What problem, now that we've selected a solution, how does that iterate for us back here to what problem we're going to solve? We're not going to cut the commute time to work with this one, so we can cross that one out. Wasting time. Can't keep up with other tasks, yes. Distance it doesn't solve. Hard transportation costs it doesn't solve. Safety on the road, it could make that one a little bit worse, but let's all pay attention. So Jason, let's move wasting time and can't keep up with other tasks. Let's move those two to the top, and those are the problems that we solve. Now, let's come back top right, and we'll give Jason a minute to catch up with us here, which is fine, but our customer segments is in the top right. And that one's just huge, isn't it? If we think, well, Allegra Learning, can one of you tell us your target? Are you comfortable talking about your business? Can you tell us your solution and target segments?
Yeah, our target segments our buyers will be parents, but our target audience is kids ages 4 to 6.
Kids ages 4 to 6. Can you get any more specific than that?
That don't speak English.
That don't speak English. How about geography? What are you targeting? The entire world, including Utah?
Outside the U.S.
Okay, so non-U.S. I mean, that's pretty specific, huh? It's a huge market, but you know exactly who you're going after. And frankly, you can avoid a whole lot of wasted time and expense by knowing really clearly who you're going after. Sometimes it's easy. I mean, was it ever tempting to say, let's do ages 2 to 60?
Yeah.
We'll talk later. I love that one. The focus that comes with that, I mean, the way that escalates your odds of success is a rather massive factor. Yeah, we may come back to that, but thanks for that. Now I've forgotten where I was when we started on that. Customer segments. We're going to go with customer segments. So who are, I mean, do any of these change now that we have that problem a little more focused? Just free form, what do we think? Busy people, employees? Okay. We had some counterpoint to the 35 to 55, and it was an interesting point. Would we change that at all?
I think in a way students in 35 to 55 is a little contradictory. Definitely there are older students. I think the vast majority of students are not 35.
So who's very best? And you know, it's a little bit of a bell curve on most of these areas. It's okay if we ignore these and these, because where is our most bang for the buck in terms of our, AJ, in terms of our marketing spend? There's AJ. Or anyone else with a marketing mindset. Where's our bang for the buck? Yeah, it's in the middle sweet spot, and sometimes that even bulges, or it may not be a normal distribution. But the fact that we're leaving somebody behind is okay. We're not worried about bringing everyone along we possibly could. We're worried about a return on our ad spend investment, and so you know that becomes fairly critical. Anyway, where's our best bang for the buck age-wise? What do we think, Seth? Do you have a proposition there? Hypothesis?
I was going to add something different. I was going to say one thing we haven't addressed is like professional drivers. If we're on the road all the time, if we would want to focus on them or omit them, I think it would be a decision.
Okay. Let's keep that in mind as we go along. What age are we going to target with some solution that makes time more productive and effective? We still need to get to our features of that solution, to the point I think Mark raised earlier. But do we need a little more information, or can we narrow that any right now?
The middle of the bell curve to me, 35 to 55.
Okay. Would you throw out students?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of different points of view there, which is awesome. Some of the best, most productive time you get when you're formulating your plans comes through disagreement and the intense debate that arises out of that. Speaking of intense debate, Mark?
Anyone who youth, whether it be a student, could be a 10-year-old on a bus going to school, or it could be someone my age who going someplace on vacation. They want their time to be valuable. They don't want to, you know, if you're traveling, you want to see the landscape and look out the window, that's fine. But the majority of people, that sweet spot is huge.
So irrespective of age, if you commute, you want it to be productive? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, I still think we need to learn a little bit more about the solution. Because right now it's still saying that it's making time more productive. Like, what does that mean? Because someone mentioned Audible. Like, not too far removed from school, until it's still relatively poor, but I can listen to Audible books, and that's not something that's a huge drain on resources for me. But if we're talking about a new type of transportation altogether, that would be a huge investment for me. That would allow me to make my time more productive.
I agree.
Then that's probably out of.
Okay, let's do that. I agree with what you're saying there. Let's jump back to the solution. What is it we're going to do? We know generally what we're going to do. Let's just have some nominations back into brainstorming mode. What are we going to do to make time during the commute productive? There's a lot of ways we can go with this, but Jason.
You could develop a program where companies can input tasks and say these tasks have to be done through an Audible format. Let's say you're a company that's going to launch to China. You want your employees to speak Chinese. So you say, we're going to develop this task while you're doing your 2-hour commute. You can be listening to Chinese, and as you listen to it, you check marks, and then the company can say, okay, you've done your job, you've improved the Chinese, here's a paper.
That's pretty interesting. So employer structured and perhaps even compensated training. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Tell me your name.
Sean.
Sean?
I think there's different ways to be productive, right? Like Audible is kind of recreational productivity, right? You could also
Depends on which books you select.
You could also make you know, the language learning CDs and audio things that are out there kind of stink. So you can make a better way to learn a language specifically for a community.
Okay.
But not everybody wants to learn a language, right? Be productive language.
So let's think of if we want to narrow this down any. I think there's maybe two ways you can go. Do we want to be productivity and educational, or entertainment and diversional, or both? Think about that for a minute. We probably need to select between one, the other, or both.
Sirius FM or XM already has the diversional market corner.
Okay. Fair point. As do radio stations in some sense. So maybe there's something else, Steve.
The idea about a company doing something. You know, 'cause the other thing that you can cut down on time there is you can allow them to cut their work hours down too, right? You're requiring them to work on that commute in and that commute home, and so you're going to add that to their day. And so there might be something where saving time just on what time they leave for work and head home for work, because you might be able to leave at 4 instead of 5 because you're working that extra hour on your way home.
There's an interesting element there, huh? It fills a need for not just one, but two players. It potentially creates a revenue stream without putting the cost burden of that on your direct user. In other words, employer sponsored in some sense. What do we think? Do we want to run with that one, or does anything else people would want to put on the board? Darren?
Run with it. It's a great idea.
Run with that one?
Like how Jason and Steve outlined it. Looks like there could be an economic model there.
Okay. If there's no dissension, let's continue to drill down. But
Can you just repeat real quick what the solution is?
Yeah, Jason.
I like the way you said it, just employer structured training. It can be any task.
Okay.
Anything you want your employees to learn or to accomplish. Do it.
Employer structured and perhaps sponsored, we'd add in there later, training. And it probably needs to be audio not visual, because we're still worried about safety. Some things like that. Darren?
So what I would propose we make it like, what's the Alexa, the thin one? It's Alexa Dot, right?
Oh, huh?
So it's a new Alexa Dot for your vehicle that sits there, and it's pre-programmed with things that, like Steve says, if your employer buys it and they send your task list through it or your training through it, you get to leave to go to work an hour later, and you get to leave from work an hour earlier because they're checking off that you're doing all the stuff.
Okay. So there's some critical aspects, Jason. Let's capture these at the top. We're now truly into features. Generically, we're saying we're making time during commute productive. It's employer-structured training, and we're going to say that it is voice recognition, I think, is part of what you're saying.
Yeah, it's a voice rec service.
Okay.
Well, that's all good, because now you can go back to your customer, what is it? After advantage, goes over there.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can eliminate almost all of these. They're gone.
It's a good point.
Because your audience now, your customer now, are employers. So you now narrowed the focus of the whole thing. Again, age is irrelevant, because it's the employer who's going to be buying it, right?
The employer is going to be buying it. We still care about the user.
No, we care about the employer, who then tells us what they want the user to do, because they're the ones going to be footing the bill. They're the ones that see the need, and so we got to create something that the employers are going to buy.
Okay, Facebook. Do we care about the users or the advertisers on Facebook? To come up with an analogy. Let's think about that for a minute. I think there's room for some debate there. But clearly there's a new big player in this mix now that we deeply care about. There's some dual elements to this, though, isn't there?
You go back to your bell-shaped curve, right? In the middle of that curve is the employer. That's That's who you're selling it to.
Yeah, that's where the decision comes from, and we now have we know something about the sale. Tell me your name again. I'm sorry. Carter.
But it isn't their problem. It isn't the employee's problem. The commute times are long. They don't care. So
they kind of care, but it's derivative, isn't it?
yeah, but yeah, it's not neatly aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Problem solution.
Yeah. So we have.
I'm saying, yeah, you care about the end user.
Yeah, it's a more complex decision environment. Who do we think signs for this? Darren, what's your rule of thumb you were talking about yesterday, or your anyway? Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, the first step in the sell is to find out who can sign, who has signing authority and money to buy.
So signing authority and money, and that's not going to be with these users, is it? That's going to be who is that in a company? Who?
It's going to be HR if it's training, like Jason said.
HR, VP of HR, something like that. And that's got to factor in here. We've got to get through them. Now, every HR person I know, they're pretty in tune with what their employees love. And so think about that. Steve, what do you think?
I mean, it's really exciting because from an employer standpoint, this can be a great perk, something that might attract somebody in there because, it's going to help their commute time, make it more productive. Maybe send them home, get there an hour later, send them home an hour earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But then for it to work, they've got to use it, right? The employer's not going to be satisfied if they're providing this and letting them go if it's not providing benefit. So you really have to work with the employees to make sure that it's actually fulfilling a need, making them better, and that when they get home, they're flipping it on and using it.
And HR people are extremely tuned into this. More money turns out to be a poor motivator. Autonomy is usually number one in terms of what motivates people, and the ability to grow and progress in your career, as well as feel like you're contributing meaningful value. This hits number 1 and 2. I can autonomously choose my training, and I can grow and progress in my career. That's going to translate to retention and some other pretty powerful things like that for our person with the signing authority and the budget. And so that becomes a big one. Jason, back to you.
You need to incentivize, because it's kind of like, if I tell my kids to play the piano, they won't play it. If I put the piano in front of them, make it fun to play, they'll just do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Incentivize and say, here's the incentive, you do it. You get the extra credit, you get the bonus, whatever it is, doing these tasks, the training, and then they do it on their own. You're not forcing, they're driven themselves.
Yeah. So there's a reason. You have to think carefully about that. Sometimes they find, and Seth educated me on this, that compensating someone to do someone kind of takes the fun out of it. Maybe it's recognition, maybe it is financial, maybe it's just, hey, I can progress in my career a little more effectively because I know exactly what my employer, perhaps at the supervisor level, and maybe that's a feature. My supervisor can train some of this. Weldon.
Well, I think you need to have an enthusiastic response from the user, which is the employee.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the employees don't like it, they won't use it. If the employer's paying for something, the employee's not using it, they will cease to be your customer.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the right example, but I've had my company adopt things before, and it was like, really? Why are we doing that?
Well, that's why I think the feedback on compensating time, it's not just sponsored as the financial cost of the tool.
Mm-hmm.
It's compensated in terms of the offset of time that you have to spend in the office.
Yeah.
And what employee's not going to like that idea?
There's a really fascinating example that someone brought up not long ago. There was a company called GoTo.com, and they focused 100% on the advertiser. And you can't ignore the advertiser. It was a search company. Google, they focused more 100% on the user experience. The GoTo focused on whoever bids the highest for an AdWord, that comes up first. Whereas Google said, hey, no, whatever our algorithms can tell us is most relevant to the end user. And I don't know who's even heard of GoTo. Anyway, they're not around. They've been through a couple of acquisitions. Google focused on the true user experience, ignoring a little bit the full preference and needs of the one who paid for it, but they got back around to the one who really drove the engine behind it. That's not an easy equation to balance, but you've got to take those into account somehow.
We do walk and chew gum at the same time. So your employer is the person who's going to pay the bill. How do you get the employer to keep paying the bill? You make a great product that the employer loves and that the employee uses.
Yeah.
You can do all of it.
Yeah. That drives results.
If you start off with that employer because they're easy to identify, that makes a wonderful marketing situation.
Yeah.
We don't have a huge universe, we've got one. But then you basically do, instead of doing inside-out thinking, we do outside-in thinking. We go to the customer, the employer, and say, what do you need? What's going to work to make it so, as somebody suggested, your employees are going to love using it?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. And I love the way you put that. Entrepreneurs have to be very adept at walking and chewing gum at the same time, don't they? Mark.
I feel like we've got a pivot here, and maybe I missed it someplace in the line. The problem originally was said was not an employer problem, it was an employee problem. I want to make my time more valuable while I'm commuting. I want to use that time. And now we've defined it as the employer coming up with a solution that I want without, I may want, what wasting my time means as a customer is not an employer problem, nor do I want an employer telling me how I'm going to be more productive in my time, because commute time's my time.
So you're saying those are potentially out of harmony with one another?
Yeah, I just,
they could be.
There's a pivot there someplace. Instead of wasting time, we're now having employer define what wasting time is for a commuter. So there's two.
So we've got to figure out how to harmonize those. Uh-huh. Darren?
I was going to say, I think the pivot was in saying that, you basically, the employer, by it being an employer-sponsored tool, it allows the employee to leave an hour later to go into the office, or come in an hour later and leave an hour earlier, which, from an employee perspective, my net perception is I just gained 2 hours in my day.
Yeah. Pretty powerful. It meets some of these things. Let's come down bottom right for just a minute. Revenue stream. How are we going to charge for this? We've got a training program, and it's customizable to the needs of the company, perhaps down to the individual supervisor level. How are we going to charge for that? Anyone? Steve, help me out here. How are we going to charge for that? What's our revenue model? Is it going to be all you can eat, or are we going to charge per seat, per head, or per supervisor?
Any of the above, as long as it's recurring revenue.
Okay.
As long as it's a subscription.
Okay. How about if we say it's per user per month, paid in advance, of course, because we have our finance people here, and we're going to need that. That's going to impact how much capital we need to raise. So per user per month, how much? Someone give me a number. $20 a month. And we'll test that and see if that works in the marketplace. We can charge a little more because it's a B2B sale now, but it's a B2C in terms of consumption. What's our target unit volume? How many people do we think we can get on this over time? Let's just say US is our market. How many users do we think we can get to?
Isn't it controlled by if we're selling through the employer, I'm assuming each employer may be different.
No, they are, but I'm just saying nationally. Do we think that we can serve 1,000 users or 100 million users or somewhere in between? It's our business. We're building it. We need to stake a claim and just kind of come up with an initial thought.
Well, I think you target for 100,000.
100,000? Okay. Anyone want to go higher? Sold for 100,000. So 100,000 is our target volume. That means our target annual revenue at this initial scale is how much? Seth? You sure that math? $20 times 100,000 is 2 million per month times 12 is 24 million revenue business is what we're targeting initially. It's kind of useful to set that there. What are our most important costs? Go over to the left now, if you would, Jason. What's our biggest hurdle, our biggest cost here?
Content creation.
Content creation is going to be big, huh? I don't see Tigran here. Tigran, how much is it going to cost us to produce this content? A lot? How much per hour of content is it going to cost, or per minute? I'm not sure how you would think of that. With RevRoad efficiency in content production, of course.
I don't know the number. It'd be hard to. Well,
Okay.
what's it costing Allegro to create content? Their actual content creation?
Any thoughts? Noah, Diane, what do we think? It's an important question, isn't it? That cost structure. And we may get through that and say, hey, it's going to cost us $24 million a year or $20 million a year, but so effectively imitates the natural entrepreneurial exercise. Literally, I mean, how many people think someone could take this and potentially, possibly create a successful business? I mean, I could see that. It'd be fun to find that person. And of course, all of us should be equity holders in that because we started it right here. You've done this. What takeaways do you have, Tyler?
What I thought was interesting is you don't necessarily need to have a big idea before starting this process. We didn't have an idea. We just identified a problem and we came up with the idea along the way.
We had a blank sheet of paper, didn't we? Which is kind of fun. Bart?
If you had a place for a tagline in here for this business, I would suggest train your employees well through sight, sound, and smell.
I think we're getting it. Oh, okay. Gotta be safe. Other takeaways. Yeah.
Just that you have to be flexible. We started with one problem and ended up with a different problem.
Yeah. In a subtle way that's the same, but it's completely different. And Jason came up with something, wow, hey, there's something interesting, but something fairly real. We didn't even hit some of these, the unique value proposition. Darren, can you explain real quickly the visual that you like to put up when you think of unique value proposition and unfair advantage?
Yeah, I like to picture a gigantic, huge, heavyweight sumo wrestler competing against a little child, toddler. That's the kind of competitive advantage I want to find.
Absolutely ridiculously unfair and could never happen. And how do you build this business into that? How do you set your cost structure so that our customer acquisition cost doesn't overwhelm the monetization and contribution profit that we get from this? Anyway, we could keep going. In another hour and a half, we could have a decent plan staked out. And at that point, we would leave it there and set it in stone forever, print it on metal. No, don't go there. Don't open that chainsaw door. Some things like that. At that point, we'd continue to iterate. We'd continue to learn from our market and from the customers. And in the end, create what may 3 or 4 more times, to Tyler's point, become entirely different businesses. But at the end, we would hone in, listening to our customers, listening to live feedback from the marketplace, not just going and spending all of our resources on the solution, but doing customer development to find out what the marketplace really wants and what will work, and then developing the simplest thing we possibly can that will give us the most learning about the market and our customers and what they really need and how we monetize that and how our cost structure works. And by the time you've been through this, somewhere between 20 and 200 times, you're going to have a majorly successful business. I hope someone does it. Thank you all for your participation and the incredible energy you've shown here. Appreciate it.